when a country moves away from its Christian foundation. So was Hitler a Christian? No, he wasn't a Christian. Was he an atheist? Probably not. If he had been a Christian, would he have done what he had done? No, not at all. And if his country had continued to follow Christianity, we would not have had the Holocaust. That surely is worth thinking about. God bless you. Bye.
There's a televangelist named Gene Bailey. He's on Kenneth Copeland's TV network.
You can pinpoint when German society changed direction, and it was this book, the first German translation of Darwin's The Origin of Species.
Oh my God, dude, please. He's going to argue that Germans did World War II and presumably World War I because of Darwin, because of natural selection. Come on, man.
It was published in 1860. It was translated by Heinrich Braun, a naturalist and paleontologist.
A naturalist? I mean, dude was just like a scientist, wasn't he? What was his name?
Heinrich Braun.
Heinrich Braun, professor of botany and director of the botanical gardens at the University of Berlin. Okay, that doesn't sound like he's a paleontologist. You know, I feel like I need to look up like literally everything out of their mouths because they just make things up sometimes. And what do they mean naturalist? Do they mean like he accepted that evolution is real?
Naturalist and paleontologist. Braun did not entirely agree with Darwin, but on one vital point they did agree. There was no God.
I'm sorry, I don't believe you. And by the way, Darwin was not an atheist, was he? I think he had doubts after figuring out like how evolution works, but I believe that he was like religious.
No creator. Man had evolved by totally natural, unguided means. Were we just animals? Was it science?
Okay, they did not claim that back then, that man evolved completely unguided without God. They didn't. You just cannot convince me that these people believed that. It was so uncommon for that view to exist in the 1860s. I think Voltaire might be like one of the first people to be openly atheist.
Animals? Was it science? Or was it just moral philosophy? One thing's for sure. Removing God from society has moral consequences.
They're saying that Germany committed the atrocities that they committed because God was non-existent in German culture. I hate to break it to them, but in World War II, say between 1920 and 1940, we'll just go with that, 95% of Germany was Christian. 41% was Catholic. 54% was Protestant, a conglomeration of Reformed Church, which is the predecessor to Presbyterian, and Lutheran, a lot of Lutherans in that area. So that was 54%. And then 3.5% were people who believed in God. That was the question. Do you believe in God? Yes, I believe in God. But they didn't identify with any specific church. And then 1.5% said, I do not believe in God. Those were the statistics. So really, you could say 98.5% of Germany believed in God, and 95% were like really, really deep into it. Germany was not an a-religious society at all. I don't know what he thinks he's talking about here. It's nonsense. They didn't remove God from anything in Germany. If anything, it got worse.
One thing's for sure. Removing God from society has moral consequences.
How could the Church of Germany, these prosperous, thriving nation, how could they become so divided? How could it split? How could the church become so blinded by things?
Okay, see, that's what's fascinating here. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to let him go. I know so much about the subject, it's ridiculous. That's why I picked this video.
Become so blinded by things. Well, you have to go back to the 1800s, in the 1860s. Darwinism. Darwinism is embraced in Germany. I mean, it is not embraced, but hugged and kissed.
This is bullshit. At a point in time in the teens, the 19 teens, I believe, in the 20s, eugenics was really popular worldwide. It wasn't just Germany. It wasn't just like religious people, or it wasn't like atheists or anything. It was just a common belief that if you are of inferior breeding stock, quote unquote, is a word that they use, then you should not reproduce. There's a guy named Oh God, I wrote about this at length in my book that I'm currently writing on this subject right now. Hasn't released yet, but check Amazon for it if you're curious. I believe it's The Church in Chains. You can check my website too, owenmorgan.com. It's under a chapter called A Cult of Science. Guy named Thomas Hunt Morgan. He's a zoologist, and he was a professor at Columbia University in New York City. He was studying eugenics because eugenics was like a really popular movement in society at that moment. And people were trying to filter out the feeble-minded, quote unquote. That's the term that they use, feeble-minded. You could accuse anybody of being feeble-minded and, you know, they'd get chemically castrated or physically castrated or, you know, otherwise have their tubes tied or whatever, sterilized in one way or another. This is everywhere. This isn't Germany. I'm talking about like in America. Remember, Thomas Hunt Morgan was in America. So this guy was studying eugenics, and he chose to study it with fruit flies. He had a room full of fruit flies. It was like fruit flies with long wings and short wings, with white eyes and red eyes and all different types. And after studying them for like 10 years or something, he finally came to the realization that directed breeding or whatever is not as simple as eugenics wants to make it out, as the eugenics movement worldwide wanted to make it out. There's nothing wrong with desiring a like healthy kids or whatever, right? For example, there's an illness or a condition that can be passed down hereditarily if it's carried by certain Jewish people. So a lot of the time before Jewish people get married, they'll have this genetic test to see if they're a carrier. And if they are, then they will get married to somebody different. That's kind of like eugenics, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to make sure that your family is as healthy as they can be. But taking away bodily autonomy is the big problem, really. Removing people's rights or ability to make decisions for themselves. And as Thomas Hunt Morgan discovered, the professor, it's just not that simple. It does not work that way. Like breeding, DNA, and all that stuff is way too complicated to try to guide it that way in humans. It's just too complicated. Also, feeble-mindedness is a meaningless term. So the scientific community, like people who understood evolution, zoologist Thomas Hunt Morgan and others, understood that it's not that simple. But society had been gripped by this idea of eugenics, and they pushed it hard. Now, that isn't necessarily from Darwinism, quote unquote, because people were aware that you could breed certain horses or certain dogs or whatever, and you'd get a product that was very similar to the last one. That idea was like long running, long before Darwin came along. So Darwin just contributed understanding to the scientific community, and society ran with an idea that was deeply destructive. Whether Darwinism was there or not, it almost certainly would have happened. Either way, the problem is respecting bodily autonomy over all else. And Hitler didn't do what he did because of eugenics, by the way. We'll talk about it more in a second. Just keep listening.
Blinded by things. We have to go back to the 1800s. In the 1860s, Darwinism. Darwinism is embraced in Germany. I mean, it is not embraced, but hugged and kissed.
They're talking about eugenics, not Darwinism. They're not the same thing.
And what it did is it caused a split between the church. The church went really liberal in one side, and the other side became more fundamentalist.
Okay. Real liberal and fundamentalist.
The other side became more fundamentalist, like Bonhoeffer, more of a fundamentalist. No, this is
such a joke, dude. Okay. If you don't know this history, just like 30-second recap. The German evangelical church, that 54%, was made up of somewhere in the vicinity of like 40 million people, 18,000 pastors in Germany, right? And they were Lutheran and Reformed church, the predecessor to Presbyterian. But there's like an overarching like federation of churches or whatever that was over all of Protestants. And it was called the German Evangelical Church. That was the name of like the conference or whatever, the synod. And when Hitler took charge, it came to the point where he set up a law basically for civil servants where if you worked in government, then you could not be non-Aryan. That quote unquote, that's the term that they use, non-Aryan. The reason they targeted non-Aryans, quote unquote, is because they were immigrants in their mind. Jews were immigrants to the area, much like Mexicans are viewed as immigrants to the United States, whether they've been here for 200 years or not. Most Jews in Germany had been there for 200 years. Anyway, Hitler tried to solve the Jewish question, aka the immigrant problem. Basically the same idea. When he started trying to solve the immigrant problem, the evangelical church adopted the Aryan paragraph of law into their legal structure so that they could exclude ministers also who were non-Aryan, who were Jewish. So if a Jewish person marries a Lutheran and he converts to Lutheranism and they have a kid and that kid is raised Lutheran and then that kid has a Lutheran wife and a kid with her, and they raise that kid Lutheran, that kid still cannot be involved in the Lutheran church because he's got like a drop of non-Aryan blood, basically. That's how it worked. Anyway, the Aryan paragraph was the focus of pretty much all of the complaints, all of the issues within the Protestant church. They didn't care about how Jews were being treated in society. They cared about the fact that the Bible says, if you come to Jesus and get baptized in his name, you are saved. Full stop. Doesn't matter what race you are or what gender or what anything. It matters if you love Jesus. That's one of like their confessions that they have to memorize when they're little, like one of those big long things. So this small subset of the German evangelical church named themselves the Confessing Church. And they didn't really break off from the evangelical church. They were still under that umbrella, but it was kind of a new denomination who completely disagreed with the idea that Jews were not allowed to convert, basically. The rest of the German evangelical church, so the Confessing Church constituted about 2,000 pastors total out of 18,000. The other 16,000 pastors were either all in for this or didn't care enough to even bother talking about it. They formed out what's called positive Christianity, quote unquote. The Reich Church did. And positive Christianity, the idea was they kept moving the goalpost back further and further. It started out with the Aryan paragraph, kicking Jews or anybody connected to Jews at all out of the church. And then it moved to, out of pastor positions or like musician positions or whatever. Any kind of leadership role of any sort in the churches are not allowed to have leadership roles. When they get pushed back, they claimed they're inferior in the same way that mentally disabled people are inferior and incapable of holding a priest position because they're just not capable of like doing the job, basically, because they're just, they're not smart enough. That's the argument that they went with. So they start out there and eventually it moved to they can't be part of congregations at all. They have to form out their own Christian congregations, the Jews do, or people connected to Judaism in any way. And then it moved to we need to remove the Old Testament from the Bible entirely. And then it moved to Jesus wasn't Jewish. And then they started retroactively changing the New Testament to be more in line with their religious beliefs that Jews were the bad guys and that Jesus, here's how they kind of came to the conclusion Jesus wasn't Jewish. They decided that Mary actually slept with a Roman soldier. And what's a Roman? Aryan in their mind. They believed that Jesus was Aryan for that reason. Anyway, they just went down this really weird path. All the while, the Confessing Church is over here like saying, what is wrong with you guys? This is like bizarre. But that was only 10% of the Protestant church, not even like the entire country, just 10% of the Protestant church. It was almost nobody that like believed this way. And the few pastors that did view it like everybody should be included under the umbrella, they started getting conscripted by Hitler. They started getting sent out to the front lines, as pastors did, in World War II. So, anyway, that was after the Night of Broken Glass. I just wrote this word down. Kristallnacht is what it was. Anyway, so what they're talking about here is the church split, the Confessing Church and the Reich Church. When the Confessing Church formed, they renamed it from the German Evangelical Church to the Reich Church, led by Ludwig Müller. He was like the president over the whole federation. He's a Nazi. All right, so listen to what this guy says. So depending on what you interpret to like liberal to mean and fundamentalist to mean, the way that I interpret that is fundamentalists tend to be like right-leaning and hard line. So fundamentalists today believe that gay people are evil. They have no right to get married. They're basically taking rights away and excluding people, right? And liberal pastors today want to include everybody. Like, what's that one? The woke pastor. I don't know if you guys remember him. I've done videos on him. He wants to include everybody. He wants to, Jesus loves everyone. That's liberal. That's how they're using the words. That's how the words were used at the time, too. So he's just completely full of when he says there was one fundamentalist group and one liberal group, and the liberals were the ones that were making everything bad.
The church went really liberal in one side, and the other side became more fundamentalist, like Bonhoeffer, more of a fundamentalist. No, this is the word. This is what's true.
That's just nonsense. That's not how it was used back then. I guess that the confessions that anybody can come to Jesus and be saved, I think that that's backed up with the Bible. I can agree with that. They used Romans chapters 8 to 11, 9 to 11 to back that point up. They also used Proverbs 31:8, the Confessing Church did. Pastor Von Jan, after the Kristallnacht, it basically says that we need to stand up for those who were forsaken. Psalm 74:8, Bonhoeffer underlined that in his Bible, basically said they have burned all the meeting places of God in the land. Again, that was after the Kristallnacht. And then Romans 8 to 11, Bonhoeffer and others at the assemblies argued that the confession was broken by the Arian paragraph, circa 1933. That's what I wrote down in my notes here. Anyway, this dude's just completely full of it.
It's like Bonhoeffer, more of a fundamentalist. No, this is the word. This is what's true. And that split will lead us into World War I, but survival of the fittest will become an anthem in...
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Wait. What did he just say? One more time.
More of a fundamentalist. No, this is the word. This is what's true. And that split will lead us into World War I.
Really? World War I, you think? Okay. Except the Confessing Church didn't split off until 1933, and World War I started in 1914, so... Whoop! Just picked a whole bouquet of oopsie-daisies on that one, didn't he? They know nothing. They're completely clueless. All they know is the propaganda that they are fed in by people who are obsessed with believing that Hitler was like an atheist and into the occult and all kinds of other crazy stuff.
But survival of the fittest will become an anthem in World War II in the fact that we're the Aryan race. We're superior to other races by...
Again, that's eugenics, not the same as survival of the fittest, really, but okay, whatever.
We're superior to other races by evolution. So the theory of evolution is what precipitated all of this.
No, it wasn't about evolution. It wasn't really about that at all. It was a belief that people who were born and, lived in the Germanic area were special. They were like supermen. Aryans were supermen, and they were stronger than any other group in the world. They were smarter, and they were more attractive and everything else. Not actually true that Hitler believed that the ideal person had blonde hair and blue eyes, as long as they were from the Germanic area. But the reason that even came up in the first place, blonde hair and blue eyes, was because there were some non-European areas that he was trying to conquer, and he was explaining how you can tell if one of these people is like one of them, if one of these people is Aryan. If they have blonde hair and blue eyes and they're in like the Middle East, then it's an indication that they have Aryan blood in their body and they're super cool. So anyway, that's where that came from. This is just like completely made up. It wasn't about survival of the fittest or whatever. It was about his supernatural belief that Germans were superior. It was nationalism is what it was, actually. It wasn't about Darwinism, it was nationalism. Oh yeah, and a hatred for immigrants. This is a right-wing movement and a right-wing problem.
By evolution. So the theory of evolution is what precipitated all of this.
Dude, just gonna lie.
In Germany.
Anyway, it's super weird to me how many people just straight up lie on this subject. Or they have no clue what they're talking about. They know a little bit, and they use that little information they have to act as an authority, seemingly. I've done an absurd amount of research in this area because I wanted to know, is Hitler an atheist, or was he an atheist? I hear all kinds of quotes from Mein Kampf, and I hear quotes from his speeches, and then I hear other stuff about him denigrating Christianity and everything else. I wanted to know, is he an atheist? And the answer is, I guess it depends on your definition of atheist. He did believe in something supernatural. It was more like he believed that Germans or Aryans or whatever from the Germanic region were supernaturally special, and that there was some kind of a creator who created them to be superior to everybody else. Was he a Christian? He was a practicing Catholic for when he was young. And his mom was super into Catholicism, and when she died, it was like deeply devastating to him. Although he could not stand his father, Alois, who was more like non-religious, his father was. Anyway, Hitler grew up Catholic, but I don't think that he was a Catholic by the end of it. I think that he constantly spoke positively about Christianity publicly, and then behind closed doors, we have like accounts from the propaganda minister's diary and from Hitler's assistant. I don't remember the guy's name now. Starts with a B, I think. And his assistant was an atheist, like hard atheist, and believed that Christianity was stupid and everything. So he would sometimes put words on Hitler's lips that other people, that seem a little unrealistic, that are anti-religion. Goebbels, also the propaganda minister, he put things in his diary about Hitler not being really positive toward Christianity, but all of that was privately said. So the conclusion I've come to is Hitler manipulated Christianity seamlessly. He was so good at manipulating them. And the Protestant denomination in the area, and honestly the Catholics in that area, opened themselves up to being manipulated when they tried to seamlessly join church and state. There was no separation of the two at the time in the area. Anyway, in my opinion, Hitler believed in something, probably a deist, and he used Christianity to get to the top. So listen to this dude. He's actually debated Matt Dillahunty before, this guy has. I want to listen to his breakdown of it.
Was Hitler a Christian? Hitler is always a good subject to bring up when you're discussing politics, religion, Christianity, and other things. Now, there's a kind of meme that's been going around for a while.
Dude, does his shirt say lead like Jed? J-E-D? Who the hell is Jed? Is that somebody I should know? Is there somebody in the Bible like named Jedediah or something? Why does his shirt say that? And look, think like Josh. It says think like Josh. I assume he means Jesus, because that was Jesus' actual real name. It was Josh, for real. I'm not joking.
Now, there's a kind of meme that's been going around for a while, and it says that Hitler was a Christian. So I will be in a debate and someone will say, oh, well, wasn't Hitler a Christian?
Yeah, he was officially on paper a Christian, yes.
No, actually, he wasn't.
Yes, he was. Are you kidding me? He was baptized Catholic.
Where does that come from?
Well, maybe because he's baptized Catholic and he put it in Mein Kampf that Christianity was like super good and he loved it and all that. I don't remember the quote now, but it was all over everything. He didn't come out as anti-Christian to any degree at all until like just a couple of years before the war ended.
Well, usually because of the internet, they're able to cite a quote from Mein Kampf, My Struggle, which was Hitler's kind of autobiography after he was in prison in...
No, it was his autobiography. It was just ramblings of a madman.
In Munich in the 1920s. And in that, he talks about Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. Well, case closed, of course. If you say that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, then you must be a Christian.
Well, I mean, he was baptized too, so there's that. And that's pretty much all he talked about for a while there when he was like younger and in the Nazi movement was Christianity. And he called out to like Christian archetypes in his speeches and stuff, said they used to call him a prophet because he said that the Jews would become a problem. And here we are on the other side, and his prophecy's been fulfilled. He was right. The Jews are a problem. You know, he'd use religious language in a kind of a veiled way to appeal to the religious crowds. Hitler had to fight. He had to wage two internal wars. There was the political war, where he had to win the most votes and get the most, be the most popular in the political system. And he also had to win the war within the church. And he had what's called the Brown Synod, which is it's like an assembly from one of the districts, the church districts in the area. They were called the Brown Synod because they were brown shirts and they wore, their uniforms when they showed up to the assembly, the church assembly. So anyway, they were like rabid Hitler supporters. They would go in and they would shout people down if they were from the confessing church or whatever. It was absolutely insane how they acted. You know the type. Kind of like Trump supporters and how they act like rabid nutcases today sometimes. Anyway, Hitler used the Brown Synod and others in the assemblies in the church districts to co-opt the church. And it started real light, just saying that non-Aryans can't be church leaders. And then, one thing after another, domino effect, everything went downhill.
Then you must be a Christian. Or in a debate I did with Matt Dillahunty, he brought this up as well, a quote that's often used where Hitler talks about the need for Christian education.
Yeah.
Now, surely that proves that he was a Christian.
Well, he was.
Okay, let's just back off a little bit. First of all, you have to ask, what is a Christian?
Dude, I love their mental gymnastics trying to justify all of the stuff before. Let me tell you the situation. Hitler, on paper and publicly, was a Christian. Hitler manipulated the church to his own ends. The church fell for it. They ate it up hook, line, and sinker. They did whatever they could to further Hitler's goals. That's the bottom line. That's what this is all about. Now, if you poor fools don't want to be taken advantage of again, like you were in how many dictatorships at this point are we up to? Has every dictatorship in history used the church in one way or another, except maybe the Soviet Union? Maybe? If you don't want to be used again, then you have to stare this in the face and acknowledge that you guys need to stay out of the state, period. You need to stay out of the state.
First of all, you have to ask, what is a Christian? A Christian is someone who believes in Jesus Christ, who's committed their life to Jesus Christ.
No, a Christian is somebody who professes to accept Jesus, period. They accept Christ. That's a Christian. That includes members of Heaven's Gate. You remember that cult back in the 90s, the late 90s, that believed that aliens were going to come pick them up or whatever? They believed that Jesus was a space alien, but they believed in Jesus. That made them Christians, at least a little bit. A Christian is somebody who accepts Christ. Full stop. You can weasel your way out of it all you want, but Christian is a self-ascribed label. Something that I tell you, you don't tell me if I'm a Christian.
A Christian is someone who believes in Jesus Christ, who's committed their life to Jesus Christ. That's evidenced in various ways, including reading and accepting the Bible.
Oh, please.
Regularly attending church, meeting with other Christians.
So if somebody believes in Jesus to the bottom of their heart, but they don't have a church close enough to them and, to attend regularly, then they're not a Christian, is what you're telling me? What?
Lifestyle and so on. Also following Jesus, who was a Jew. Now, Hitler wasn't too keen on the Jews, as you may realize. So what about those two quotes? And there are others, there's about 4 or 5 others.
Well, a little more than 4 or 5, but okay.
Well, first of all, you need to realize that the quote as regards education was when Hitler was not yet chancellor, not yet dictator, and he was addressing a Catholic teachers' union before the major election.
That's true. Oh, sure, yeah.
Now, given that 95% of schools in Germany at that time were either Catholic or Lutheran.
That's true. That's a little-known fact. Society was splintered into a billion different groups. If you were a Catholic, you went to Catholic schools and you were part of like the Catholic Boy Scouts, basically, is what it was. If you were a communist, you went to a communist school, communist Boy Scouts. If you're a social democrat school, social democrat Boy Scouts, that kind of thing. It was splintered into so many pieces. They're like communist sewing circles and stuff. Seriously. So Catholicism eventually, like Hitler leveraged that fact to gain more power by telling Catholics if the bishops signed this pledge of loyalty, this oath to Hitler in 1933, before anything had really gone down that was really terrible, if they signed this concordat, this agreement, he would let them keep their Catholic schools and their Catholic youth groups. Eventually, he kind of slowly absorbed the youth groups into the Hitler Youth, though, which is like his, it's like the Boy Scouts kind of.
And they were enormously influential. Hitler was a politician, and of course he was going to stand up and say, I support fully what you are doing.
Dude, I love that he is so critical about Hitler and his involvement in Christianity, but his acceptance of Donald Trump's Christianity is right over his head. He doesn't even realize it. I think Trump is an atheist. I don't like that any more than anybody else. I just think that's the case. I just love it how these people like selectively choose who they want to believe is atheist or whatever. By the way, Hitler was not into the occult. That is false.
But that doesn't make him a Christian, not at all.
Oh, please.
Neither does calling Jesus his Lord, because not everyone who says to Jesus, Lord, Lord, is going to...
Are you kidding me with this?
Be a Christian. There's lots of people you can say things. I think the
Christian is a self-ascribed label. Hitler told us he was Christian. He was Christian. Maybe he changed his mind later. You can look at his writings and see when it started to change. Look at, Goebbels' diary entries and everything. See when he started first saying anti-Christian things. That doesn't even mean that he was not Christian. He could just disagree with a lot of, Protestant beliefs on the subject. Maybe he was like more Catholic-leaning. This dude has no reason, no basis to say any of this.
I think the way that you evidence this and you look at this is you ask, what did Hitler believe? What was his background? He was baptized as a Roman Catholic.
Yep.
But as far as we're aware, he never went near a Catholic church.
What are you talking about? There are pictures of him coming out of churches. Are you serious?
From the First World War.
Wait, so there were no pictures of him coming near a church from the First World War? Why would I need a picture from the First World War? There are pictures of him afterward, and there's a whole history of him going to church when he was little and everything. What are you talking about?
We also know that he hated the church. If you look at his table talk, if you look at Martin Bormann, or you look at someone like
Martin Bormann. He was a Nazi Party official and head of the Nazi Party Chancellery, private secretary. Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah, Bormann was an atheist, and he liked putting atheist things on Hitler's lips, whether they're true or not. I think most of them probably were not.
He loathed the church.
The church, not Christianity, the church. Yeah, he did have a problem with the church, obviously. Like, he tried to manipulate it callously, like he didn't even care. Getting his Nazi pal Ludwig Muller to the top of it and ordering him to do all kinds of crazy. Yeah, of course he hated the church.
He saw the Catholic Church in particular as a rival to his pretensions for power.
That's true.
Now, does this mean that Hitler was an atheist? I suspect he probably wasn't.
Okay, good.
He seemed to have some kind of belief in mythical German gods, possibly even more occultic.
No. He was not occultic. Hitler liked Nordic symbols. Nordic just means north, basically. It's north of Germany, so like Iceland and stuff. He really liked Nordic symbols, and that's why the SS, like the police of Germany in World War II, they had like the little lightning bolt SS. That's a Nordic symbol. Just a fan of the symbols, that's all. He was not into the occult. That's just that's a myth. He was not into the occult. He was a bit. Owen, look up The Coming Race. I guess that depends on what you mean by occult, but no, he was not into the occult. He believed that Aryans were a super race. That is as far as the occult whatever goes. And is that would you say that's a cult, or would you say it's pagan or whatever? No, he just wasn't. I don't know what sources you're trusting. I'll tell you which sources I'm trusting. The Coming of the Third Reich by Richard J. Evans. The Third Reich in Power. The Third Reich at War. Big, glossary of every World War II era subject you could ever want to know. And the witnesses were silent. Extremely difficult book to find. Is no longer published, no longer being printed. Writing a whole book on that subject. That's about the Protestant church in Germany and how Hitler, whatever. And Hitler's Pope by John Cornwell, I think his name is, or Cornwell. That one was about how the Catholic Church kind of co-opted, or was co-opted by Hitler to some degree, and the Pope's relationship with Hitler. Those are the sources that I'm trusting. He was not into the occult. He wasn't. That is a myth.
He didn't read the Bible. He didn't go to church. He despised Jesus Christ. There is no way that he was a follower of Christ.
What made him think that he despised Jesus? I've never heard that before. He despised the churches because they were a power base that was not him.
I think one of the more disturbing things for me, of course, is that he grew up in a country which had been profoundly Christian, but had turned away from Christianity.
Are you serious? They turned away from Christianity? What? Again, I will say, 41% Catholic, 54% Protestant, like Lutheran and Reformed Church, Presbyterian predecessor. And that adds up to 95% Christian, like hard Christian. 3.5% say, I believe in God. 1.5% say atheist. Do you know the percentages in the United States compared to that? Think about how religious the United States is today. 71% of the United States identify as Christian, compared to Germany's 95% Christian. Non-Christian faiths, 6%. Jewish is 2%. Germany had 0.8% Jews, 585,000 before everything went down. Before April 1st, 1933, basically, when everything started hitting the fan for them. 3.1% atheist, 4% agnostic, 15 or 16% nothing in particular. Point is that Germany was way more religious, like way more Christian than the United States, like by a mile.
It's not to say that everyone who turns away from Christianity is going to turn to Nazism, but it does say...
Are you... What? I'm not saying that. I'm just kind of sticking it in your ear there a little bit. I'm not saying that if you aren't a Christian, then you're a Nazi. I'm just saying, you know, there's a weird little correlation there. Are you kidding me with this?
One of the more disturbing things for me, of course, is that he grew up in a country which had been profoundly Christian, but had turned away from Christianity.
It's just made up.
It's not to say that everyone who turns away from Christianity is going to turn to Nazism, but it does say this, that the ground conditions for Nazism and extreme ideologies is set when a country moves away from its Christian foundation.
But they didn't. They didn't move away from Christianity. Are you serious right now? For what it's worth, when they were conquering territories, they gained more Christians. I mean, technically, you know, not through conversion, but by conquering. But isn't that how Christianity has spread itself, you know, throughout history in the first place? One other thing I want to mention about this, Hitler was not into the occult. He wasn't. However, Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, was into the occult and paganism a little bit. There were a lot of people around Hitler that were either atheist or pagan in some form or whatever. And Himmler even saw Jehovah's Witnesses in camps and said, these guys are like, they have nerves of steel. They will watch one of their people get shot in the head and refuse to, you know, say, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness anymore. Refuse to. He said to Hitler, Himmler did, we should work that in somehow to this cult of personality we've created for you. And Hitler basically said, I don't want anything like supernatural like that. That's stupid. So Himmler was very much trying to build up this mysterious, like, occultic vibe, and others around Hitler, but not him.
Set when a country moves away from its Christian foundation. So was Hitler a Christian? No, he wasn't a Christian. Was he an atheist? Probably not. If he had been a Christian, would he have done what he had done? No, not at all.
Are you serious? Oh, so what about the other 45 million Christians, Protestants, not just Christians, Protestants in Germany who did do that and believed in Christianity and Jesus and all that? What about the 20 million Catholics who did heinous in the name of Christianity? I mean, there wasn't 20 million Catholics that did bad things. A lot of them probably didn't believe in the Nazi cause, but 20 million Catholics total, and some percentage of them were all in for the Nazi cause. What about them? You saying that there was literally no Christian in Germany at all because if they were Christian, then they wouldn't have done that? Are you kidding me with this?
And if his country had continued to follow Christianity, we would not have had the Holocaust. That surely is worth thinking about. God bless you. Bye.
We wouldn't have the Holocaust if Hitler had been Christian. Hitler definitely used the idea that Jews killed Jesus to whip people into a blood frenzy. That was like one of the, the core things he used to piss people off. He used Christianity every step of the way, like all the way. He couldn't have done it without Christianity. Like, this guy is just absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. And so is this guy, Greg Stevens. And so is this guy, Gene Bailey. They're all absolutely ridiculous and desperate to superimpose their beliefs that Hitler was like a pagan, occultist, atheist, all of it together. Pagan, occultist, atheist, Darwinist, what other words can I fit in here? A communist, and all of the other stuff. They're desperate to superimpose that stuff onto him. And that's just like not true. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. These people are just parodies of themselves at this point. You know what else I found out reading these books? Hitler really wanted to take Palestine, but it was controlled by the British at the time. It was a British territory. And there was like an ocean between Germany and Palestine. It wasn't really feasible to do because I don't believe that he had aircraft carriers, and you kind of need those to do an invasion over the ocean. Anyway, the other option would be running supplies by train through like 16 countries or something, Turkey and everything else down there to Palestine. So he couldn't make it there. He couldn't bring an army there to capture it and take out the Mizrahi Jews that were in the area. Ashkenazi were in Europe predominantly, and Mizrahi were in like the Middle East, Palestine and stuff. So what Hitler did was funded out of his own purse or whatever missionary trips. He sent Protestant Christians like Lutherans down there, a bunch of them, and set up, had them build a church and set them up with like a place to live and everything, and basically got them to convince everybody in the area that Jews were like absolutely terrible and they were taking over everything. So he was using religion in that way too, to where he couldn't conquer by military, he was trying to conquer by culture, by sending Christians down there to get them pissed off and work with Arabs to eject Jews from the region, basically. Because he realized that a lot of Jews were, like, when they were fleeing Europe, had nowhere else to go, they went to Palestine. And the Arabs there, they had already been propagandized for a while against Jews. So that's another story for another day.